All right, Meng Yao said, but tone down the scenes between Bifengzun and Twink Yao. You can write anything you want about Twink Yao and the monk from the mountains, however. What was his name again? What was his name again? Jun! Twink Yao shivered. How many times have you written shivered since the beginning of the scene? Mo Suanyu asked. Only 20, we're good. Nye Hui-sang answered. Jun! Twink Yao shivered. The cold mountain air raised goosebumps on his exposed skin, his nipples hardening under Jun's urgent kisses. Oh, Twink Yao, Jun moaned, kissing lower on his abdomen. I know we mustn't, but I cannot control myself. When I saw you under the moonlight, I knew I had to have you. I should have said something then. I should have made you stay. But I couldn't take you away from Bifengzun. Jun's slender, sensual fingers made quick work of the knots holding Twink Yao's clothes together. Please, Jun, Twink Yao struggled. He too had wanted Jun. On that first night, he had seen him sitting on the porch of Gentian house with his hair loose and his bronze chest bared under the light of the moon, softly blowing a tune on his long, hard jade flute. It had made the hair at the back of his neck stand up. But he could have never betrayed Bifengzun, not until he threw him out. Twink Yao covered his eyes with his arm to hide his tears that flowed as brilliant as liquid alabaster. Why? Oh, why had Bifengzun turned him away? Why had he discarded him? Yet even if Twink Yao had been misused, he could not bring himself to hate Bifengzun, whose warmth and affection he had drunk deep from and gotten drunk on it like one would get drunk on fine wine. And in this drunk, fuzzy haze, he never expected the day would come for him to sober up. What are you thinking, Twink Yao? Jun asked, running reverently his hands over Twink Yao's bared thighs. Jun, you must know something. My heart is torn between you and Bifengzun. Even if he sent me away, I want an opportunity to win over his heart again one day. That is why I decided to become a spy for you and enter Volcano Palace as the evil Wenru Khan's aide. I do not want to lead you on, Jun. Oh, Twink Yao. Jun breathed on his knees, darting his tongue to lick a stripe on the sensitive skin of his thighs. I worship you. You are so pure, so gentle. I do not care for these things. If you allow me to express my fondness, I will be made happy and seek nothing else. The sight of Jun on his knees, looking at him with the tenderest longing, racked him. How can I resist? He whimpered, and let wild lust consume him. Jun finally took his bared jade lotus stem into his hands and blew gently on it, as if it had been a frozen bird he had found at some howling snowstorm, and he had tried to warm it with his breath. Jun, Twink Yao moaned, his hand finding purchase on Jun's sculpted shoulders. Twink Yao, Jun, Twink Yao, Jun rasped around Twink Yao's viral jade pillar. Jun, Twink Yao struggled, feeling the sweet pearlescent substance of his jade stones rise up and erupt like a sudden hot summer rain. Twink Yao, you're pinching me, Jun said. At the same time, Jun and Twink Yao enjoyed their last. Bifengzun was lying sleepless on his bed in Qinghe, tumultuous thoughts raking his head. Yes, he had loved Twink Yao, and yes, he had been betrayed. But he could not set him from his mind, like a wet seat. The memory of Twin Yao's kisses still clung to him, inflaming the passion in his manhood. He reached with his large hand and grasped the meaty trouser snake. Maybe we should leave my brother entirely out of this to help Meng Yao convince him, Huaisang said, scratching out that last part about Bifeng Zun and his meaty trouser snake. But that's going to leave a pretty big hole in the plot, Mo Suanyu said. Not necessarily, Nie Huaisang replied. Yu Baisang had been underutilized as a character thus far. Yu Baisang shouted and struggled sexily as he was carried off into Volcano Palace, tied tightly with some very unsexy ropes that cut into his very delicate skin. He had been ambushed while out on a bird-watching trip, and by bird-watching, he meant his nightly peeping trips. And by bird-watching, he meant his nightly peeping trips to Qinghe's foremost cruising spot, the city park. Yu Baisang went there in order to learn by sight, the secrets of lovemaking, so that he might employ them once in the future with Twin Yao, whom he coveted above all else. The leery wench jostled him around, teasing him about the wicked fate that awaited him in the hands of the evil prince, Wen Doobie-Doobie-Doo. The door to the evil prince's private room was flung open, and in entered the guards with their captured prey. They threw Yu Baisang bodily on the floor before the prince's feet. Wen Doobie-Doobie-Doo, with his chest bared, holding a whip, rose from his throne. Oh, how he had waited for this. He had often heard tales of Yu Baisang's ethereal beauty, of how he was the prized and pampered heir of the Qinghe Yus. Rumor had it that he was a willful yet sensual Ypsilon, dripping with eroticism, unbroken yet. When Doobie-Doobie-Doo's natural dominant tough instincts compelled him to sample this beauty himself, but even more so he wanted to humiliate and dominate Yu Baisang in order to wound the pride of his brother, Bifeng Jun. Bifeng Jun had been a thorn in Wen Ruhan's side for the longest time. Sorely defiling his heir would please Wen Doobie-Doo's lord and father. Yu Baisang looked up from the floor, looked up at him from the floor, defiant, like me. His eyes were teary and wet, yet full of scorn. His bottom lip had split, and the red blood glinted in the half-light, making Wen Doobie-Doo lose his mind. I lost it. I'm sorry. I will do the sentence again, because I respect you. Yu Baisang looked up at him from the floor, defiant. His eyes were teary and wet, yet full of scorn. His bottom lip had split, and the red blood glinted in the half-light, making Wen Doobie-Doo lose his mind. Wen Doobie-Doo slammed the whip on the floor. Leave us now, he commanded. The guards, fearing the tough's potential for violence, scattered, shivering and afraid. Wen Doobie-Doo approached the bound Yu Baisang. Using his folded whip, he tilted his chin upwards to look better into those liquid sapphires that looked at him with such contempt. I am the most powerful. I'm most certainly not the most powerful tough in Volcano Palace. I am the most powerful tough in Volcano Palace, Wen Doobie-Doo said. His eyes half lidded with desire. You will submit to me tonight, Yu Baisang, or die. Yu Baisang shuddered. It was the well-guarded secret of the Qinghe Yu sect that he himself was a tough, albeit a very weak one. Yet his passion for Twin Yao had drove him to a desperate act. He had summoned the spirit of the most powerful Ypsilon to have ever graced the land, a rare beauty of indeterminate gender named Moshuan, and who had died under mysterious circumstances. It had been said that no one had been able to resist this Ypsilon's charms. If Moswan wanted someone, their scent could drive them mad with lust. That spirit he had invited into himself in order to finally conquer the object of his lust. Now, in the presence of a powerful tough, Moswan was finally awakened. The intoxicating scent of pear blossoms and dew-dabbled peonies filled the room. Wendobidu shuddered, the force of his desire knocking him back. He stumbled dizzily, like this. He stumbled dizzily backwards, inhaling a true Ypsilon's aroma. Moswan in Yubai Sang's body blinked seductively. The Wen prince had been rendered completely speechless. The same defiant boy that had drove him to destruction was now kneeling before him as a gentle and pliant beauty. I too have awaited long to be had, Moswan rasped, shivering erotically. Tifeng Jun's brow furrowed dangerously, like this. I'm so hungry. His fingers all but crushing the spine of the new monstrosity in the form of a manuscript he held in his hands. Is something the matter? Tifeng Jun? Mengyao asked, smiling. But deep inside him, he was setting himself. Metaphorically, always. He refilled Tifeng Jun's teacup with an even stronger, nervely relaxing blend. Remember, all the proceeds from Nye Sang's works will go to the city orphans, I guarantee you this. Tifeng Jun clenched his fist and got up in a rage. You bending his teacup! That brat! I raised him since childhood, and he completely writes off my part. Tifeng Jun's name is first on the title, but he hardly appears at all. He roared.